Welcome back to Micro Moments of Self-Love. I missed you all. Today we're starting off this episode with a deeply spiritual and healing conversation. Today's episode is called The Beauty in Breaking, a spiritual journey back to wholeness, where I'm joined by Shaykh Jihad, where we talk about moments of breaking and moments of difficulty that bring us back to ourselves and back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm Fatima Deuji, and this is Micro Moments of Self-Love. Let's begin. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh Jihad.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Thank you so much for being here with me today for my podcast, Micro Moments of Self-Love. It's been an absolute pleasure listening to you the last few nights. Especially loved the Painting Under the Stars, where you spoke about Dua Abu Hamza Thumali and the lessons we can take, and the whole idea of how sometimes we need to break to find ourselves and to find Allah. So I'd just like to start off with a little bit of a story. I'd love to hear about how you found Shia Islam. What was your journey like?
First and foremost, thank you to avail me of this opportunity. I really appreciate taking your time to be in this podcast. Very interesting that you mentioned this, because we're talking about the dua of Abu Hamza Thumali, and I actually came to Shiaism through the duas of Ahlul Bayt, salamullah alayh. In fact, I remember when I was discussing Shiaism with one of our local imams, and that's how I got introduced to Shiaism, he gave me 2 books. And he said, listen, these are the only 2 books I will give you. If you don't become one of us, don't come back to me.
Really?
Yeah. Okay. He was very jolly, and he wanted to make things easier basically and break the ice. So subhanallah, the first book that he gave was Sahifa Sajjadiyya. And I skimmed through every single page in that book. And of course in that book, Dua Abu Hamza Thumali, Dua Makarim al-Akhlaq, and you name it, it's there. At that moment, those micro moments you're talking about?
Yes.
This is what actually changed my entire world, that micro moment, that when I looked at this book, I said to myself, that's the first thing I said to myself, why have we been deprived of this wealth? Why has this wealth been taken from us and not introduced within the Muslim body? Regardless of the affiliation of school of thought, it's the least of my concern, right?
Yes.
Here you're talking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's what matters.
Yeah.
Even that you want to take away from us?
Yeah.
So that's my first encounter with Shiaism.
And that just basically opened your world, and you started going into, to study Shia Islam.
See, the key to anything is when you come across something that is so profound that it shatters your world.
Yes.
Once your world is shattered, there is a new beginning. Absolutely. Just like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran that after truth, there is only falsehood.
Yes.
You cannot find extra large or double X large or 3X large truth.
Yeah.
Truth is one size, and after that, it's falsehood. So once you reach that, and you basically try to skip it or avoid it, then you're actually taking yourself further into brokenness. And that was the door.
And
absolutely.
How did your family take all this?
You mentioned this. It's very funny. Whenever I was asked this question, I always quote what happened with mom.
Okay.
So what happened is that there are, as you know, there are so many, in inverted commas, good friends who wants to create fitna. I have not yet told mom or broke the news to mom that I've switched. So they went ahead and told her before me, which made my situation a little bit more difficult, more embarrassing, so to speak, because I wanted the opportunity to open up and speak to her and tell her these things. Unfortunately, they went ahead and told her. So she asked them this question, which I, until this day, I say, may God bless her soul, wallahi. She said, when he converted, did he become better ethically or worse? And they were shocked. They were coming to create a fitna between me and my mom. And they said, look, in all truth, in all honesty, no, ethically, he's become much, much better.
Oh my gosh, wow. And did she end up converting?
No.
She did?
No.
Oh, wow, okay. But that's so
subhanallah, at least she was encompassing, embracing of my journey. Because that's my journey.
Absolutely.
I appreciate her journey, although she's an ardent lover of Ahlul Bayt, because she was raised in an era in Lebanon, for example, where there was no sectarianism.
Oh, okay.
So the use of Ahl al-Bayt in her surroundings and upbringing was very prevalent.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, very
Okay,
prevalent.
okay.
Yeah.
Wow, so the wilaya was there.
Definitely, yeah.
Beautiful.
I think that's where I got it from me.
Yes.
Yeah,
you
subhanallah.
mentioned that it's through your mother's lap that you learn it.
Exactly.
And so that's what a beautiful story.
Subhanallah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. So, we speak about breaking.
Yes.
And I'd like you to share a story of maybe a moment in your life that broke you and how you found Allah in that moment.
Having said that, this reminds me of an incident once when I lost my dad. All right? Yeah. I lost my dad when he was very young. My dad left this world when he was about 56. And that was right after, maybe 6 or 7 years after we've migrated from Kuwait to Australia. Okay, so he came to Australia, we settled. 6 years later, Allah called him back to him. So at that particular juncture in life, I was tossed between three things.
Okay.
Finding my way to Shiism, leaving Sunni Islam, and losing my dad. All right? So I was confronted with three challenges at once. I looked introspectively and I said to Allah, if there was no good in this, I'm at my lowest, Ya Allah. I'm now at my lowest. Right? Your infinite wisdom works in a very mysterious, borderline funny way.
Yes.
Right? That you are testing me at the crossroads of three major challenges in my life. Right? And I said to myself at that moment, it made me realize that none of us found God standing up. We all found God broken on our knees, appealing to Him to say, Ya Allah, this is the moment that I want your backing and your support.
100%.
At that particular moment in my life, the peace I felt, just saying these words and reminiscing over these words and thinking about these words, it's like a hand extended down from heaven. And it like lifted me from all my misery, all my challenges, all my negative thoughts, only to, show me a way in life that says, it's at your worst that I will always be standing on top of you. This reminds me of a story, by the way, if I can, if you allow me.
Please.
There was a man who would pray to Allah all the time. And whenever he would pray to Allah, he would find a set of footsteps walking next to him. So he would know that he's safe, because he thought that these were, not literally, the footsteps of the divine power.
Absolutely.
And one day he was at his worst, like myself, like many of us that find themselves on their knees. And this is the moment in which he wanted God the most. But he looked to his left and right and he couldn't find that extra footsteps, And then he went to sleep at night and he was sobbing in his sleep, wanting an answer. Why was I abandoned in this critical moment of my life? Then God inspired him and said to him, how many set of footsteps did you see? He said, only mine. He said, no, you are mistaken. These were mine. That time I was carrying you. I was not walking beside you. I mean, you can't get more divine love than that. If that is not ishq, true inner love from the master to the servant, then I don't know what love is.
Absolutely. I think you mentioned something about surrendering. And I think the problem in today's world is we like to control everything.
Yes.
And Islam is beautiful because from the get-go, we are told to surrender to Allah.
Yes.
Right?
This reminds me of a story of a person that came to Imam Hussein, salamullah alayhi, and peace be upon him. He said to him, look, I need help.
Yes.
And that help entails that I get back on the track. So Imam Hussein knew that this guy needed a bit of shaking, because he was not asking for the right things at that particular moment. So he said, look, I can make this happen through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I can't guarantee anything from my end. But through Allah, I can guarantee you the world. But you have to give up one thing. He said, what? He said, you relinquish God's wilaya over you.
Wow.
You become your own wali. Yeah. So you administer all your affairs by yourself without divine intervention. The guy looked at the Imam, put his head down for a moment, lifted his head up. He said, I'm fine, I don't need anything. Without the wilaya of Allah and His supervision, I cannot survive. So I'm done. I've got what I want.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Subhanallah.
Because it does give us a lot of hope.
Of course.
I think as Muslims, we are, this is why if you look at Palestine, right?
Yeah.
Why is it that I feel like if the same situation had happened in the West, for example, right? Everybody was in the shopping malls and in the supermarkets fighting for things in a very isolated and selfish society.
Exactly.
But you look at Palestine, everyone's together in the month of Ramadan, where there is, very little access to food, very little access to healthcare. Everybody's there taking care of each other because they know that at the end of the day, it's through the hope of Allah, right? It is through Allah.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
There are two concepts that we have always misunderstood in our way we've been taught religion, or the way we learned religion, and that is something that fills you from within after, of course, trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is that to know that there are people out there who are willing to come and extend a helping hand. And that particular concept is not very much taught within our system, although we have so many references for it. For example, I remember there was a great marja who passed away a few years ago, and this particular statement is still on his website until this very day. What does the statement say or read? He said, I've studied and taught Islam for 50 years. I found out in all of my studies and learning that the best act of worship after the obligatory is to be there to help others.
Yeah. It reminds me also that I had a professor at Georgetown, and he was a business professor, and it was in one of our management classes, and I remember, we were sitting in the lecture, and he says to us, like, do you want to know the secret to success and happiness?
Yes.
And this is a business class, and we're so excited. We're like, this guy going to give us like a formula, And he said, in order to be successful, like happy, you have to find a purpose greater than yourself and make a difference in the lives of other people.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
And since that day, I really pray for this my professor, because every step of the way, every day I ask myself, what am I doing to help other people? How am I adding value? Right? Because you can make all the money in the world, but if you're not adding value and you're not there to make a difference, then what is it all for?
If you look around the world, since when the receiver is rewarded? It's always the giver, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So when you give, you grow.
100%.
When you give, you feel that sense of happiness within you, that you've achieved something that no money, you cannot put money to it, no matter what the situation can be.
Absolutely.
Subhanallah.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about difficult emotions. We all go through shame at points in our lives. Anger, just jealousy, envy. How does Islam teach us to deal with these emotions?
It's interesting that you say that, because Islam does not condemn emotions, but what it does, it guides us on how to channel them in the right way. So because these emotions are part and parcel of your existence. It is what you are made of. If they are not used in the proper sense, so they become a negative energy, and that negative energy will impact you internally and externally. Right? So the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt Salamullah alayhim, in all of their statements, in all of their dealings, channeled their emotions in the right way. They did not condemn them.
Absolutely.
All right? Often we have the wrong saying. Men don't cry, for example, which we have heard in all cultures. This teaches us and teaches our men and children, male children, to be emotionless.
100%.
Tears, shedding tears, if anything, it's a
sign of being alive and human. Right? And if you cannot express these emotions and channel them in the right way, then you are suppressing your inner voyages, and you're adding more stress and anxiety to a system that God gave you in order to look after not to excessive.
It's condition of getting worse.
Yeah.
You know?
That's what psychology says as well.
Right?
Right. Yeah.
You know, the more you vent, the better you feel.
Yes.
And the more you keep and bottle up, the more anxious and stressed you're going to be.
And how lucky we are to be lovers of the Ahlul Bayt and
Absolutely.
have this opportunity that, I was watching one of his talks, and he was reciting, about Karbala, and he was weeping.
Yeah.
And this guy is a military leader.
Yes.
And he is
Yes.
known as the tough guy.
Yes.
But he was weeping and he did not care.
Absolutely.
And it's so beautiful.
Yeah. You know, Imam Ali, one of his attributes is what? The owner of opposites.
Yeah.
Which means he cried
Yes.
in the night like a baby, but he was a warrior by the morning. So he had the opposite qualities in one man.
Yes.
To show what? To show that at the end of the day, these are part and parcel of your existence.
The
You need to
duality.
balance, exactly. You need to find that particular. And not only that, instead of suppressing these emotions, for example, we are encouraged to process them. And we process them through what? Reflection, prayer, and seeking wisdom and helping others.
Absolutely. It's beautiful.
And that's how you turn the negative into the positive.
Yeah.
So what we may perceive as negative because of this, shame or stigma that attached to these particular, what we call emotions, like jealousy, for example, Islam was so beautiful in rechanneling that energy of jealousy in such a way that he gave you an alternative to jealousy and called it felicitous joy.
Wow.
Which means what? It's okay to like what others have.
Yes.
Right? But it is not okay to ask for that blessing to move from them to you. Rather, it taught you to pray for them to keep it, but forgot to give you similar to it or better.
Wow.
And they call it in Arabic ghibta.
Beautiful.
Which is completely a different dimension where it shifts the paradigm from negative to a very positive entity.
Is the envy and the jealousy to something beautiful.
Exactly. Exactly.
Wow.
It's unbelievable, And that's how we need to look at emotions, A prophet of God, for example, cries over his son,
Yes.
Yaqub and Yusuf. What an amazing story.
They cry until he goes blind.
Yet he did not lose trust in Allah.
Yeah.
But expressing emotion is appealing to the Almighty through our weaknesses, that we have never given up on you, but we are expressing it in another way.
What a beautiful.
Subhanallah.
I watched a very beautiful lecture by Shaykh Jihad on emotional intelligence in Islam.
Yes.
And he talked about how every human being has anger, desire, creativity, but they're all ruled by the aql.
Ahsant.
Your
Intelligence.
Your intelligence.
Intellect.
And that everything has its place, and that at the end of the day, example Imam Hussein, he needed anger in order to fight for justice.
Yes.
Right? But at the same time, when his daughter came to him, the way he dealt with her, that emotional intelligence that our Ahlul Bayt has, that is the beauty, how to navigate yourself in different situations.
Exactly. Anger in itself has been embedded in us to have a negative side to it or a positive side. For example, a person who sees an accident on the road, a person being hit on the road, if he's not driven by anger to save life, that emotion of flight, right?
Yes.
He would just stand by the road and let anyone just, go by, right? But it is because of that divine intervention of putting that, I say, ni'mah, blessing within us, that we have that, emotion of flight to help others, to be at the rescue of. And how beautifully you said it, like how the Imam was able to manage anger in the battlefield, yet be the most sympathetic father towards his loving daughter. Subhanallah.
It's beautiful. We have so many lessons to learn.
True. Absolutely.
So, I think that one aspect of it is acknowledge these difficult emotions, without feeling that we're failing in our faith. And I'll give you a personal example. Sometimes, we all have different tarbiyah, I guess, like different, what is it called? Like we're all different, in the way that we live our life, through our experiences, through our childhood. So sometimes some people are more angry. Sometimes some people, have certain aspects of them that are a little more emotions that are heightened, right? So a lot of times when maybe I feel anger, right, then I start feeling I'm a bad human being.
Yes.
Right? And then you feel like, oh my God, Allah hates me. What am I doing? Right? Your mind sometimes goes.
Plays on you.
Yeah.
Yes.
How do you manage your emotion, without feeling, a sense of like, that you're failing spiritually?
I say acknowledging emotion is an act of self-honesty.
Yeah.
It's not a sign of weak faith.
Yes.
Because we always associate getting angry or getting frustrated with one losing his faith. Not necessarily at all. At all. It is a sign of telling you are being honest with yourself. You are actually expressing a pain, sadness, whatever frustration you are facing in your life through these emotions. The Quran describes Prophet experiencing this, emotion of distress. They didn't look at them in a negative light. In fact, the Quran endorsed the action.
Oh, wow.
In the question of Yaqub, it says when it talks about Yaqub, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was to take the crying of Yaqub as something negative, he would not have endorsed it in the Quran.
Yes, absolutely.
He said that he expressed grief over him until he turned blind. To that extent, you can actually express grief as an emotion of self-honesty and not be reprimanded by Allah. No, we don't see any reprimand. Allah didn't turn to Yaqub and say, how dare you, you're a prophet of God, you've lost trust over your son. No, he mentioned the act gracefully and recorded it in his own text to validate the emotion.
Oh, how beautiful.
Right? To validate the emotion, not to cancel it, to validate it. Because if he was not to validate it, it would not have been mentioned at all. It would have been omitted. And if it wasn't also validated, God would have taken an issue with Yaqub. Because God is the ultimate teacher of his prophets. Right? And he uses them in order that we can learn from them and we can learn through them. So Islam teaches us that emotions are part of the test of life. Right? And how we manage them defines our spiritual growth. And that's how we can grow with these emotions.
That's beautiful. So, I think, that's one aspect of you feeling spiritually weak, but also you feel like you're being judged, right? But I'd like you to talk a little bit about our du'as and how our imams actually show their vulnerability and weakness in our du'as. Maybe you can give us a line or two from the Abu Hamza Thumali, which you talked about.
The way you mentioned vulnerability. Being vulnerable, in my humble, simple opinion, is not a flaw. It's not a flaw at all. You know what it is? It is a pathway to finding ikhlas and sincerity. In all the du'as, for example, in Abu Hamza Thumali, that classical, amazing, mind-blowing moment when the Imam says, if you only listen to your friends, where the sinners will turn to. If the sinners can't turn to you, and you're only there to listen to those who are your friends, then what hope do I have? That teaches you that when you are vulnerable, God is always there. He's not going to let go of you. When even you are at your worst, He's going to be there, and He is there to rescue you. Only when you are broken, as we started, that's when you find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you are at your rock bottom, as they say, that's how. And that statement by Dua Abu Hamza is like, it gives me shivers, that Allah, that it's like he's telling, Ya Allah, you cannot leave. It's like the Imam is so confident in the way he is addressing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that I know you are there for your friends, but you cannot also be negligent of the sinners, because after all, they are still your servants too. So whether they sin or not, they still have no hope in anyone but you.
Oh, yes.
Right?
It's beautiful.
Subhanallah.
And
Subhanallah.
It's interesting because I think Allah loves you when you're authentic. When
Absolutely.
you are yourself.
I swear.
You're not trying to be someone else. You're not trying to be fake. And that is the
Exactly.
beauty, right? Because
Yes.
when you are yourself, in life, you reach the highest
Yes.
grace.
Yes.
But also in front of Allah, you reach the highest position, right?
Of course.
You know, when you're authentically yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows us
Yeah.
inside out.
Yeah.
So we don't need to pretend to
Yeah.
be something we are not,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Just came the way you are,
Yeah.
without pretentious.
Yes.
You know, come to Allah the way you are, the broken,
Yes.
the happy, the
Yes.
sad,
Yes.
the vulnerable,
Yes.
you name it. Come the way you are.
Yeah.
He's there to receive you, no matter what.
Absolutely beautiful.
Subhanallah.
I want to talk a little bit about, now after you deal with the difficult emotions, a little bit about your self-awareness, right? Because I think in the world we live in, it's, we are getting pulled by so many different things. You have your social media, you have
Yeah.
people telling you who you should be, how you should be, right?
Yes.
So I'd love to understand from an Islamic perspective, how do you build self-awareness in Islam?
Yeah, I think the key to self-awareness is reflection. Without reflection,
Yeah.
you cannot have self-awareness. Why?
Yeah.
Because what did Imam Ali say? Man arafa nafsa, faqad arafa rabba.
Yeah.
The one who comes to know himself, he will come and recognize his creator.
Yeah.
So you have to start here.
Yeah.
You have to self-reflect within you,
Yeah.
to extrapolate.
Yes.
Firstly, your weaknesses, and secondly, your potentials. Because Imam Ali, in another statement,
Yeah.
which is so profound, that
Yeah.
turned the mind of people like Roger Garudi, the French philosopher,
Yes.
to look at this statement by the Imam and say, hold on, this kind of talk
Yes.
does not come from an ordinary human being.
Yes.
What is the statement? Your illness is from you, yet your cure for that illness is also within you.
Yeah. Wow.
Isn't that amazing?
Yes.
How profound these statements are if we can use them
Yeah.
introspectively
Yes.
in order to heal from within.
Yeah.
You know? And then when we exhaust
Yeah.
all the potentials that have been embedded in us,
Yes.
and we find that we are still in need of help, then we can source help from the outside,
Absolutely.
from the professionals. You know, something I have like a qualm with,
Yes.
and especially within our community, the use of psychology within our communities.
Yes.
It's frowned upon. It's looked upon as something negative. A consultation with a therapist does not mean you are crazy.
No.
Does not mean you've lost your mind.
Yes.
It means you are trying to find purpose in your life,
100%.
right?
Yes.
And you're trying to explore through the help of someone who's a professional
Yeah.
how to navigate
Yeah.
this, difficult moment in your life in order to. They say, but you have Allah, you have the Imams, you have the Hadith, but who says that through therapy you're not engaging in the Hadith or the Quranic,
100%. Yes.
statements that Allah has made available to you? Isn't He the one that said, for example, when I fall sick, I turn to Him for healing. Yet Allah says, healing does not come without reason.
Yes.
So I've created reason for healing.
Yes.
Seek the reasons first,
Yes.
and then put your trust in the ultimate healer, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there are always means,
Yes. Yes.
to get these kind of healings happening within our systems and within our lives.
You talked about reflection, and I think it's so very important, reflection. But I think that it's becoming harder and harder because people can't sit with themselves, right? And this is something that I used to struggle with,
Yes.
right? And I think it's obviously done on purpose, that the world wants to distract you so
Yes,
much.
yes.
That because, if you, Imam Ali was right, if you know yourself, you know
Yeah.
Allah, and you are so powerful.
Absolutely.
right? No one
Yeah.
can break you.
No.
Right?
No.
And no one can also manipulate you.
Exactly.
Right? But the problem is that the world is trying to distract you so that you can't know yourself, so
Yes.
that you can't have access to any higher divine power, right? So what would you say would be, how are small ways that people can start navigating that in terms of just tiny steps they can take to know themselves, and navigate this process?
Micro moments of dhikr,
Yes.
remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, every now and then. Take the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't need to sit in absolute seclusion, but train yourself slowly with these micro moments to take the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala within your day-to-day transactions.
Speaking of micro moments, I've realized that journaling also, just at the end of the day, sometimes, we go through life, and I don't know if it's ever happened to you. There was a time in my life where I couldn't even remember what I had for breakfast. Because, you're living on autopilot, right? And you are so unaware of your day because you're just doing, right? And that scared me because someone asked me, how was your morning? And I literally blanked out. I couldn't remember. And I said to myself, that's scary, right? Because that means you're unaware of your actions, you're unaware what you're doing. So I started journaling. Every night I would sit and I would actually recall how my day went. And I felt like it brought so much, just a sense of accountability to my life, right? That I did this and this is how I felt, right? And other practices that really helped me, I was someone that I couldn't be alone, right? I was constantly doing, right? I'd have to play a sport all the time, or I'd go to work, or even if I had nothing to do, I would create a project, right? Because I wanted to keep myself busy. While it's positive, it's too toxic because now you are just doing and doing and doing, right? And it's like, it's productivity, but it's going to the toxic side, right? Because sometimes you need your nervous system to relax.
Absolutely.
So there was a time that I felt that my nervous system was so wrecked that I could not focus. Someone would tell me meditate, and I'm like, what do you mean? So I would turn on the meditation, and after a minute, I would feel anxiety because I could not sit with myself. So this is where the micro moments came into place. So what I would do, 30 seconds or 1 minute, I would put the timer on my phone and be like, Fatima, just 1 minute, right? And I would do either breathing for 1 minute or a little bit of yoga for 1 minute. And I did it every single day, the consistency and the accountability. And I would do it and do it. Then, your capacity increases, right? Because now you're like, okay, I can do it for a minute. I'll try 2.
I'll increase it.
And I'll try 3. And, my life, I feel, has shifted so much now because I do what I feel is important to me now. I'm not chasing anymore. I'm doing what aligns with my purpose.
Of course.
When I sit with myself and I reflect and I say, this is where I'm struggling, this is what I want to get better at, I'm more focused in what I want to do, right? And I think that's what life is about. It's about micro moments. You can't change yourself overnight.
No.
And I think that it's not even possible because I don't think it's authentic when you change yourself overnight,
Absolutely.
right? But if you do small steps every single day and you are consistent with those steps, that's where true transformation happens.
100%.
Right?
Saying this, the Prophet ﷺ, someone came to him and he said, Ya Rasulullah, I've dedicated 80% of my time to prayers, like extra prayers. He said 80 is a lot. So he said, then 70. He said a lot. He said, then 50. He said, a lot. He said, I won't go down more than 50. He said, it's up to you, but I'm telling you, it's a lot. That same companion, when he grew older, he said, I wish I had listened to the Prophet when he told me, lower your commitments because consistency is better than numbers. Consistency is better than numbers. We're not so much fond of quantity. We want quality.
Absolutely.
And that's, what you said is just to be consistent, even if it is small steps, baby steps they call them, but the consistency behind it is what gives you meaning. What gives you that satisfaction, what fills your life with meaningfulness. Subhanallah.
A friend of mine asked me once and she's like, I don't understand you Muslims, you're making your girls pray namaz at like 9 years old. They don't even know what they're doing. And I really went home and I thought about it and I said, and then a few days later I said to her, sometimes action comes before thought.
Yes.
Right? If you are 9 years old and you are doing this practice, okay, and it's a form of meditation.
Yes.
You don't know what you're doing. You are just doing the actions. When you hit 15 or 18 and you're struggling with maybe anxiety, or you're struggling with something that's bothering you, the action is there.
Exactly.
That's when the meditation kicks in.
Exactly.
Right? And today, when you ask an adult that start meditating, right, it's so difficult because you don't have that action that's been. So I feel like it's been given to us by Allah to actually heal us.
Oh, definitely.
Right?
Oh, definitely.
You know?
Definitely.
And
Before Islam was bent on obligations and rituals, 13 years the Prophet stayed in Mecca preaching without any rituals. No salah, no fasting, none of these items, in order to teach people how to be consistent first with thought. Be consistent with your thought, clear your thoughts, be true to yourself about what you want in life. Disconnect from all the clutter around you and focus on the main spring of life, which is Allah. And that's why the Prophet said, say there is no God but Allah, and you will attain success. That was so consistent over 13 years. 13 years of La ilaha illallah, La ilaha illallah, repeated all the time. When the obligation came, it flowed. It became it's now by default that I'm accustomed to it because of that little micro steps of consistency.
That's beautiful, and I love what you said about discipline of thought, because sometimes our mind, right, if we are not wary, our mind will take us to very dark places within ourselves, whether it's self-talk, where we're degrading ourselves or degrading other people. So if you are disciplined and you keep your mind and your thoughts disciplined, to be more grateful, to be more positive, and you can do that.
Absolutely.
Right? I think that it literally changes the whole trajectory of your life.
Without a doubt. There's that famous saying that says, if you are idle, then you are the devil's playground.
Absolutely.
So if you don't have something engaging you that is consistent and useful, you are letting yourself exposed to being tampered with in any way, shape or form, and you become a very, very easy target to satanic temptations. And that's where you lose the plot. That's where you disconnect.
Absolutely. Beautiful. So I think we've all gone through phases where we feel that we've been spiritually disconnected, right? And how do we begin to return to Allah gently and, return to that awareness gently? And, I wanted to just talk a little bit about Dua al-Sabah by Imam Ali, where there's this line that says, "Oh Allah, illuminate the darkness of my soul with the light of your closeness." So how does self-awareness allow us to recognize when our soul feels distant or dark?
Look, as you mentioned earlier, when you want to heal yourself and you want to reconnect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you cannot leap forward a major step because you will burn yourself out. In order to reconnect with Allah, Allah gave us a nice remedy in the Quran when He said, for example, you take the first step and I will take you a million steps ahead. He gave us the beautiful example of the youth of the cave, Ahlul Kahf. What did He say about them? Where did the rescue to being on the right path came from? Was it initially started, or did it initially start from Allah, or did it initially start from them? The Quran actually was very, very clear on that. It stated they were youth that believed first. What happened? What was the outcome? God says we advanced them. So you take the first step, we advance you. You come to me a palm span, I will approach you a hand span. You come to me walking, I'll come to you running. Just recognize the fact that when you are disconnected, it is due to certain factors. Maybe your inner peace is lost now. You don't find that peace within you. So you start those small steps, daily supplications.
Yes.
Why do you think the school of Ahlul Bayt is so bent on supplication in the morning, in the afternoon, before you go to sleep, after you wake up?
Yeah.
Is it just because words are being repeated? It's not that. It's small steps towards finding peace within.
Yeah.
And that peace is the cause and the pathway to connecting again with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Absolutely.
You know?
Beautiful.
Without having to go through extravagance.
Yeah.
I remember a story that this story, like, it has a lot of connection to my heart. The Prophet was circumambulating the Kaaba in the company of Jabir.
Okay.
Right? So, and a Bedouin joins them.
Yes.
All of a sudden, he disconnects. So the Prophet continues and he looks at Jabir. He says, what happened to the Bedouin? He said, I don't know, Ya Rasulullah, we lost him for some reason. He says, okay, we'll find him later. So they finish the 7th round and they meet at the foot station of Prophet Ibrahim. So the Prophet says, Ya Akh al-Arab, O Arab brother, what happened to you? He said, Ya Rasulullah, I followed you. I could not understand the music you and Jabir, you were talking about. He described the words of the Prophet like musical. So the Prophet looked at him and says, what were you saying when you were doing your circumambulation? He said, I'm simple, Ya Rasulullah. I was saying to Allah, keep me away from hellfire and give me Jannah. He said, by Allah, around this our music was being turned.
Wow.
This is the music, or this is the language we were speaking. But it was so profound, he couldn't relate to it. So the Prophet is showing us also that you really want to connect to Allah, just be yourself.
Yeah.
Just be yourself.
Yes.
Talk to him in a language that you understand. Talk to him as if you are talking to your most intimate of friends. You know, don't go into this rosy, eloquent type of language. You don't need all of this. You know, there are certain moments, when your soul is so much profound and finding that nur in connecting with Allah, go into dua Kumain, go into dua Abu Hamza al-Thamali, explore all this major, munajat al-Sha'baniyya, Allahu Akbar, and all this. But in moments of despair, no, you need that intimacy. You need that comfort zone. You need to connect with Allah at your own level.
Balance a sense of self-awareness and self-compassion without jeopardizing either or, right?
Yeah.
Especially, when you're confronted with your own flaws and your own mistakes, how do you balance these two?
I think Islam is unique in that sense because it teaches us a sense of balance between accountability and mercy. And it's very interesting what you mentioned before when you said that, when you used to sit with yourself and write a journal and bring yourself to accountability. One of the greatest scholars of Islam, Imam al-Kadhim, has a very profound statement, very interesting statement as well, in which he said, ليس منا أهل البيت من لم يحاسب نفسه في كل ليلة. He's not among our followers, the household of the Prophet, if you are unable to bring yourself to accountability on a daily basis.
Yes.
Look at the worth of bringing oneself to accountability, because then you develop the habit of what? Of being grateful. Allah says what? وَإِن تَعُدُّوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ لَا تُحْصُوهَا. If you enumerate the blessings of Allah on you, you will fail to count it or keep account of it. But what do? We always enumerate the negatives, not the positive. If we start and shift the paradigm by enumerating the positive as opposed to the negative, wallah, we will find no negatives in our lives. We can only see beauty. Just like Sayyidah Zainab. Ma ra'aytu illa jamil. I saw nothing but beauty. Sometimes when I read this statement, I sometimes ask Sayyidah Zainab, which Karbala are you talking about? Do you have a different Karbala to the Karbala that we know? Because the Karbala we know is full of blood, carnage, killing. So which Karbala are you talking about? She's talking about the Karbala of surrender in the hands of the Almighty, that He will not let us loose. We will not get lost. Even Imam Hussein, he said, Inna Allaha ra'ikum. He says to Sayyidah Zainab at the moment of his departure, when he bids them farewell, don't worry, I'm going, but Allah is the one who will protect you after me. Subhanallah, look at the shift of paradigm in the mindset of Sayyidah Zainab. Do not despair, because God is there. He's not going to let go. It's just like, for example, may I? sometimes people complain and they say, where is God when I need him the most? They forget sometimes a moment when, for example, when a student who's studying medicine or a student who's studying law, for example, sits for an exam for about 8 hours or 10 hours. In that moment where he's answering these questions, can he claim that his lecturer has abandoned him? No. You know why? Because he was there before the exam. He's there after the exam. He was there throughout his life in campus. It is this moment that he left you according to your limited thought in order to give you now the opportunity to put everything he gave you into that paper. And that's exactly how Allah deals with his servants. I've given you everything. Now the moment came where you are being challenged. You think that I'm no longer there? Ajib, so strange how, a human being can think about the supremacy and the intimacy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala towards his creation.
Absolutely.
SubhanAllah.
And Ali said that I see in everything, I see God before it,
Exactly.
I see God after it, and God through it.
Absolutely.
And you know what
Absolutely.
I love about the Ahlul Bayt is the
Yeah.
consistency of their message.
Yes.
Imam Ali said that.
Yes.
He did it. Bibi Zainab, same thing. She was living through it.
SubhanAllah.
Today, to be able to say, I see nothing but
beauty.
That means you saw God before it, you got through
Absolutely.
it, and God after
How
it.
beautifully said. Absolutely. Absolutely. And these are the gems that Ahlul Bayt have left us with, How can we not make use of them in our day-to-day challenges, in our today life, in our today transactions, in our day-to-day, interactions, whether at home, whether with our kids, our husbands, our families, see God in everything that you are interacting with.
And Imam Ali also said, kill your ego before you die.
Subhanallah.
Right? And the reason I feel is because this ego is what is getting in the way of your life to be, this is why we are not able to be grateful. This
Yes.
is why we have all these walls up, right?
Absolutely.
In order to connect to Allah, to get to know yourself, to have better relationships with people, kill your ego.
Exactly.
Day,
Exactly.
Right?
I think the biggest hindrance in human interaction is ego.
Absolutely.
What stops me from approaching you, what stops you from approaching the other person is that ego. And subhanAllah, Allah from the outset gave us the example of Iblis in order to learn how to kill our ego. And we still haven't learned. How funny the human race can be, They are insistent on keeping that ego, But it's of no benefit to you, Yes, have a sense of what we call human worth. That's beautiful. You know why? Because God gave you that human worth. He said, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. Surely we have created Bani Adam with honor. So that honor is positive.
Yes.
But don't spoil it with ego. Because ego is from Satan, but honor is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
For those of us who struggle with having this sense of ego, how would you say would be a tip to navigate that in our everyday life?
The best way to navigate ego is to compare yourself to the vast universe you are living in.
Yeah.
Where do you sit in that world?
Yeah.
In comparison to its vastness, where do you sit? What number do you hold? What position? What shape? What actually space?
Yeah.
What space do you carry in that vast world that you are in? And compare yourself after all of this to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
The duality, I was just thinking about because, I've been very into Quran tafsir.
MashaAllah.
And just last week with my group, we talked about how we came from a droplet of semen.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
at the same time, then Imam Ali tells you everything's inside of you. The
Exactly.
universe is inside
Absolutely.
of you, right? So it's like that balance, right?
Yeah.
Find that balance within yourself.
Exactly.
Right? Compared to Allah, right? You are nothing, but at the same time, you're everything, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
balance yourself.
Absolutely.
Right?
It's very interesting that you mentioned this. Yes, you are nothing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pointing to that aspect of your life. You are nothing if you start to sense that ego in you.
Yes.
But you are everything when you are able to wave away your ego and replace it with humbleness and humility before Allah. You become everything. You know why? Because you become God's vicegerent. إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. I'm creating a vicegerent. You are now worthy of representing me, but less the ego.
Oh, beautiful.
Leave that to me.
Yeah,
You know, as the Qudsi hadith says, Al-'azamatu ridai. Glory is my upper garment. Wal-kibriya'u. Ego is my lower garment in a spiritual sense. So whoever fights me over these two garments, I take him without any mercy.
Yes.
You know, because these are attributes of glory.
Yeah. Yeah.
You cannot be claiming them. You know, you are here to shed your ego in order to find true freedom with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
One thing I practice is, Allah says that kill yourself for me 70 times.
Yes.
I love those who kill themselves for me 70 times a day.
Yeah.
So one small practice that I try to do is, now I'm very conscious. Whatever small thing happens, whatever interaction I have, I always try to think, okay, how would I deal with this? And if Allah was like right in front of me, like how would I position myself so that I am keeping Allah in mind first, right? So I think that has helped me a bit.
Of course, this actually brings to light the statement or the hadith or the narrative by the Prophet ﷺ, in which he says, worship God as if you can see him, but if you can't see him, then rest assured he's seeing you.
Yeah.
So you are in balance.
Yes.
If I can't see him because of my limitation, definitely he can see me. So how would you behave?
You said, right?
Yeah.
That I can't worship a God I don't see.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Subhanallah. Subhanallah.
Beautiful.
Amazing.
Beautiful.
Amazing. Amazing.
So we've come to the third
part of our discussion, which by be connecting God through these tracks that we have, right? Filling them with Allah, right? So how do we start filling ourselves with Allah now, and filling this emptiness after training, right? And where does divine love come into the process?
Feeling broken, in my humble opinion, is the first step as a mean to find a gateway to connecting with others, to finding that closest. Because, remember when we first spoke, I said we will find Allah on our list when we were completely broken. So when we find ourselves broken, it's not something to be alarmed about. No, we should now introspectively start talking to ourselves and say, now the gate is open. Allah has already started opening the gate because He knows you need me now more than
any other time. So you use that opportunity. Look what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in chapter 94, verse 6. Verily, with hardship comes ease.
Yeah.
Then He says, verily, with hardship comes ease. You know what the Mufassirin of the Quran said? He said, it is so amazing how the Quran has put the word hardship between two ease.
Yeah.
To indicate that hardship can never overcome ease. Allahu Akbar.
Yes, beautiful.
How beautiful is that? So rest assured, no matter how big your hardship is, you will always find ease with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He will come in order to pave the way and grab you with your hands and say, I am here. I have not left you.
Yes.
I was waiting for you to come.
Beautiful.
Subhanallah.
And I think what's interesting is people, they misconstrue the ayah and they think it's after hardship comes ease.
No,
but
it's with. So
many times it's also us positioning our lens that within the hardship we have to always look for the good.
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
For the positive.
Exactly. Oh my God, it's like you read my mind. Islamically speaking, there's a beautiful hadith which is divine, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, now He's presenting Himself to us in light of positiveness. Look what He says. He says, I am the way my servant thinks of me.
Yeah.
If he thinks positive, he will only find positive. Now God shifts the paradigm. And if he thinks negative, God does not say you will find negative. You know what He says? If you think of God negatively, don't blame anyone but yourself. Wow. Because God is not negative.
Wow.
God is only positive. Yeah. So pain that we think is pain can become a mean for purification. Drawing one towards sincerity in action, prayer, and thought.
Oh, beautiful.
Subhanallah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So the key is to see trials as reminders to lean on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not as something to take you away from Allah or something to break you. No, Allah's love subhanahu wa ta'ala is there at that moment in particular, when you need it the most. Look at this concept. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Rahman wanted to introduce how a person should reach out to people on the basis of teaching and learning, what did he say? He said, Ar-Rahman allama al-Quran. The merciful taught. If you don't have mercy, don't teach. Because if you want people to connect with you, show them love.
Yes.
Show them ishq.
Yeah.
Show them care. Show them concern. Just like I extended myself to my servant on the basis of Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, the attributes of beauty as opposed to the attributes of glory. Subhanallah.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Subhanallah.
So we've discussed a little bit about this, but what are some small, consistent spiritual practices you would recommend? You talked about the dhikr, which I think is beautiful and it's so important. What other small practices would you recommend to, constantly be connecting to Allah?
Yeah. This is something I reflect on myself. And it's a micro moment.
Yes.
I wouldn't go to sleep every night unless I show gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I sit and I talk to Him and I say, you have overwhelmed me with your blessings.
Yeah.
You've given me everything I deserve and more than that. In any action I take, if I want to reach out to my children, I reach out to them with the word Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Because the Prophet ﷺ, you know what he told us? He told us every action that is not or does not begin with Bismillah is severed. Constant reminder that our movement, our hands, our legs, everything in us moves with the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whispering the name Allah whenever you feel you are in a state of despair, acts as a micro step, towards that moment. Performing a simple act of 2 rak'at salah, randomly, when you feel that you are, empty, or you need that support. Sitting in silence for a few minutes, not hours on end, few minutes, 1, 2, 3 minutes, after prayer, or reflecting the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the basis of His attributes of beauty. That acts as a catalyst for you to continue that connectivity. One other very important thing, small acts of charity. Helping others. The Prophet ﷺ said in a statement, helping to reconcile between people is better than all your general prayer and fasting.
Wow.
You know why? Because when you see that connection between two people who have not spoken or connected with one another over something very trivial in life, and Allah gives you the tawfiq to reconcile their differences, and they give each other that first hug, that first forgive me, I may have wronged you, and then they become intimate, for example, next of kin, their relations, their brothers, sisters, cousins, whatever they. Can you, in all honesty, in that moment of reconciliation, put any money to that moment?
No.
You can't, right? So these small acts of charity fills you from within with gratitude and recognition of a greater power that gave you the ability to carry that act of charity.
Beautiful.
Small but sincere acts of connection with others. Go visit a sick person in hospital. Help an orphan. Attend to a widow. See her needs. What can you help? Try, if you can, to train yourself once in a lifetime to give what is best as opposed to what is left. Because we often give others what is left. No. You know what Allah says? لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ. You will never attain righteousness until you give what is best, not what is left. These small acts, micro steps, as you call it, I love that word, I love it, is what gives you that sense of finding yourself being complete and connected again with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Those are such beautiful, beautiful steps, and it's so interesting how when you look at science, right? I was watching a podcast the other day, and one of these scientists was saying that there is scientific proof that when you give charity, you become richer.
Yes. Yeah, not only that, I'm so grateful you mentioned this. I actually gave a speech about 2 days ago about praying to others without others knowing. It has been proven scientifically that praying for someone in intensive care, for example, suffering from a particular illness, without that person knowing, they found that there are certain waves that hit the brain of the patient upon receiving that prayer. The doctors fail to explain where it's coming from, and then they carried further studies. They found out, and this is a surgeon in California, by the way. She's a neurosurgeon, a lady who is a practicing Catholic. She said, I made these studies. I actually observed these studies in a clinic that reading 12 minutes only a day of uplifting spiritual literature, whatever it is, but it's uplifting you spiritually, will lower the likelihood of becoming Alzheimer's or to suffer from dementia. And 12 minutes is the minimum you can do according to Islamic recommendations or active recommendation of reciting in a day at least just 50 ayahs of the Quran. It takes you 12 minutes. Subhanallah, what else do you want? It's like God has given you everything. Just utilize it.
The thing is that now you hear all these practices where they're like gratitude journal, and this has already been in Islam for years.
For years,
right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
I noticed that when you start doing these positive acts, right, all of which you mentioned, and you start doing them, you want to do more.
Absolutely.
It's like this whirlwind, right? It takes over, and you just keep wanting to do more and more good.
You know why? Because now you've developed a trait.
Yes.
And that trait becomes part and parcel of your own existence. You cannot part away from it. So it's you. Now it is you. You are an absolute personification of what charity is. Because you become inseparable from it.
Absolutely.
Subhanallah.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Subhanallah.
Thank you. So how does loving yourself, even in your lowest moments, become a form of worship and remembrance of Allah? So in Dua Kumail, it reminds us of your light that illuminated everything. How can we find that divine light even in the darkest emotional moments? And how can loving ourselves become an act of remembrance?
Common misconception. Often we were told that to love oneself is a form of selfishness. But that loving oneself in a positive way, in recognizing the beauty of love, starts with yourself. If you are unable to love yourself, you will never be able to love others. It starts introspectively. You need to give yourself that sense of worth. Self-worth. Self-worth does not come from emptiness. It does not come from vacuum. If I consistently keep putting myself down, right, in a negative way, then I have taken the honor that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given me, right? And now I'm acting contrary to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So don't constantly say to yourself, I'm adi, I'm normal, I'm nothing, You're nothing, you're nothing, you're nothing, you end up being nothing, But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not want that for you. He created us with purpose and dignity. So how can we take the very essence of what Allah created us with away from our own selves and then think that we can actually give love to others? It has to start from within. And to care for ourselves is to honor other creation because you are part of that creation, right? So start with yourself, honor yourself. Even I would go to the extent of saying, pamper yourself spiritually, because then you will find your own worth. And when you find your worth, you will find self-compassion, which is aligned with the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when you find self-compassion and you align this with the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is a core attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you will be able to give the world all the love they deserve and all the love that they cherish and want from you. It's a balance.
Yeah.
You know, it's a balance.
Yeah.
You cannot heal someone if you yourself is sick. You know, you need to heal yourself from within so you can heal others with you as well.
And I always believe we are mirrors of each other.
Yeah.
What you feel inside, you will see in someone else. If you feel hatred inside, you'll see hatred.
Absolutely.
Right? So I always say to myself that, you know, whenever someone says something and it triggers me.
Yes.
I take a moment and I ask myself, what part of me is feeling that it needs some compassion today?
Wow.
And this practice was very tough because, you know, sometimes we are, again, you know, when you don't have time to reflect and you're busy all the time, trigger, the whole day you're triggered.
Yes.
Right? And what ends up happening, you start developing a belief system and a behavioral trait.
Exactly.
You start becoming angry. You tell yourself, no, I'm just an angry person.
Yes.
No.
It's
You're
not
an angry person, right? What's happened is you've taken the emotion and you've let it go on for so long.
Yes, untreated.
Untreated.
Yes.
It's become a personality trait, which should not happen.
Exactly.
Right? So a lot of times when I do feel like something's upset me or I don't feel too good about a situation, I'll sit down and I'll say, okay, what part of me doesn't feel okay with this? Because I do believe that we're in this world, that it's my existence and everyone else is just literally showing to me what I feel about myself.
Yes.
So if you walk around this world feeling you are loved, because you feel love inside.
Exactly.
You are compassionate, because you feel compassion.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
You will meet people like this.
Indeed.
Honestly, the trajectory of my life changed. Now, when I meet people, sometimes someone will come and tell me, oh, didn't that conversation sound off? And I'll be like, not at all. I feel it was great.
Wow.
Right? Now, maybe I'm living in an illusion, but I would rather live like that than constantly second guess what other people are, you know? I also feel like you have to also leave some room for compassion for other people in the sense that, look, we are all struggling. If you feel that someone has wronged you, if you feel that there's something has happened that you are hurt about, I think just like Allah is all forgiving, right? Find that compassion for other people. Understand that maybe, you know, Allah says, give someone 70 reasons.
Exactly, Imam Ali.
Right? Imam Ali.
70 reasons,
70 reasons
before you accuse them.
Right? So sometimes, you know, think to yourself that maybe they're going through something at home.
Exactly.
Maybe something is upset them, right? And take the high road. Right?
Put yourself in their shoes, you know, and see how you would want them to respond to you in that way, you know. Subhanallah.
Shaykh Jihad, this has been absolutely
Thank you so
beautiful.
much.
Honestly, I feel like you've lit something in my heart. Thank
you so much.
It was such a beautiful conversation. And, you know, I look forward to many more together, inshallah.
Inshallah.
You know, and
thank you for the opportunity.
For
it was amazing. Thank you so much.